Welcome everyone, I'm Andrew, an Enterprise Customer Success Manager at Snyk, and I'm joined today by my colleague Andre, who is a Snyk Enterprise CSM and an ex-developer. In this session, we're going to be talking about things that you as executive sponsors, security analysts, and developers can do to ensure rapid adoption of Snyk across your organization.
Thanks, Andrew. As we have a lot to cover and we don't have a lot of time, so why don't we just jump straight in?
Sounds good. So enterprise companies often have geographically dispersed business units with hundreds or thousands of developers, and they invest in Snyk because they're looking to achieve specific security outcomes. So, Andre, given that defining and tracking key success metrics helps our customers measure their progress against goals, what are some of the most common metrics you've seen customers track?
Usually when we start talking with customers, they are mainly thinking about their technical implementation. And when we start asking them about those KPIs, then we start triggering the conversation for having a measurement and definition of those KPIs. And then customers start understanding that deploying in Snyk is also changing their internal processes. Some of the KPIs that we commonly see is amount of high vulnerabilities. You want to make sure that you are reducing the risk of your company. Having an SLA for 0 days vulnerabilities, you want to make sure that not only you're finding the vulnerabilities on time, but also you are fixing them according to the SLAs that you defined previously. Mean time to fix vulnerabilities. It's not only that you need to find the vulnerabilities, you need to make sure that you're fixing and fixing faster than you used to be. And another KPI that we've seen commonly coming in the last days is user adoption. The company started to understand that having the developers using the system is a key factor. And another new trend that we see nowadays is gamification in order to make sure that user adoption is getting a boost.
These sound great. Now, I want to pick up on KPIs by stakeholders because I think it's a really important point. What types of KPIs by stakeholders have you seen work well? For example, for executives versus security versus developers?
Executives, they are usually focused on the quantity of the vulnerabilities, and they want to make sure that the risk that they are having now is lower than it used to be. If you're thinking about the security team, they are not only focusing on the quantity, but also on the type of vulnerabilities, and they want to make sure that they have the right prioritization to work on the vulnerabilities that are quite critical according to their understanding of the security threats. And the developers is totally a different game. They want to make sure that the tool that they are using, it's not impacting their ability to deploy and develop fast. So they want to make sure that the deployment of the tool is as transparent as possible for them. And Andrew, can you share with us some of the goals that you're seeing with your customers?
Yeah, sure. My customers' goals vary depending on the outcomes they're aiming to achieve. So to ensure they set achievable goals, I start by walking them through Snyk's open source maturity model, highlighting what other customers have decided to track. So at the 3-month stage, I typically suggest to customers that they set goals that are focused on gaining visibility and priming the pump. So things like build Snyk into at least 90% of your pipelines by X date, so you can establish a baseline of risk. Or if you have thousands of projects, focus on trying to build Snyk into 100% of your business critical applications by a specific date. At the 6-month point, I encourage customers to ask themselves and their CSMs like us questions that really help inform future goals. So how many severity issues has Snyk helped us fix in the last quarter? Is it trending up or down from the previous period? And more importantly, why? Or are we catching more issues in the design phase and thus fewer issues in production? And how's that trend looking over the last couple of quarters? Are we truly shifting left? And then once customers hit the 9-month mark and Snyk is widely adopted, I suggest that they set more specific time-bound goals, like remediate all cross-site scripting issues in our front-end apps by the end of the quarter. However, if you're going to set company-wide goals, you'll obviously need widespread developer adoption if you're going to achieve them. So with this in mind, Andre, tell me about some of the tips you give customers to help them drive adoption.
Definitely, user adoption is one of the key factors for success of projects. Deploying Snyk on the pipeline, it's quite straightforward, but having developers to use the tool is a different game. So usually we start with what we call an awareness session. That we run a stranger danger session. That is a session where a hacker shows how you can hack a system just by knowing the vulnerabilities available on open source code. So developers understand why they need a tool like Snyk. It's not enough all the code review that they are doing, that they are coding securely. They understand that they need another tool that will help them, and then they need to fix those vulnerabilities. A new trend that we've seen happening now is having gamification also to help with this activities. Tell me, Andrew, what are the tactics you've seen in your customers?
Well, from a tactical perspective, I definitely agree with you on stranger danger sessions. They're a great way to get developers excited about building security into their SDLC workflows. Something I've seen work really well is having Snyk early adopter teams present their key learnings to business units who haven't necessarily adopted Snyk yet. These internal sessions I find really help accelerate learning and ensure more seamless onboarding experience because, well, let's face it, it's easier to work from a template and from someone else's mistakes. I think the most important or effective thing customers can do to ensure widespread adoption is taking a crawl, walk, run approach to deployment. So trying to do too much too soon is going to result in confusion and poor adoption across the board. So to counter this, many of my customers choose to integrate Snyk into their pipelines first because it allows them to gain quick visibility into the risk, and it introduces Snyk to developers in a very non-intrusive way. After they do this, customers then start to roll out Snyk's SEM integration features like autofix PR, which tie more directly into the developer's workflow. But by this point, developers are more familiar with Snyk, so adoption tends to become more organic. I'm also seeing more customers, especially enterprise customers, use their security champions programs to drive adoption of Snyk through education. So, for example, developers will be invited to earn their security champion program passport, which may take 3 to 6 months to complete. And as part of that program, they're required to learn about open source security by using and setting up Snyk. And the result is it gives developers a really excellent foundation in open source security. And they also learn how to use Snyk on the job.
I really like this approach. I think it's very important that we should emphasize that having deployed Snyk is not only a tool, is a change in the whole process. And in order to have this process, we always should start slowing and having all the changes being very gradual.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. So one of the things I want to touch upon is configuration settings. What should customers set, or configuration settings should they put in place before importing thousands of projects?
I would say the first step they need to do is to turn off all the notifications and make default notifications and make sure that they are turning on only for the administrators. The second one is turn off everything that can break the build or can block them on proceeding with their PRs. The third one will be to turn off everything that is automated. You don't want automatic fix PRs or automated upgrade processes being called when the users and developers are not that used with Snyk. And for big customers, I would say that definitely they need to build some automation tools and make sure that they have all the automation in place before they start actually doing their deployment.
So that's interesting. Can you unpack that last point for me? Tell me a little bit more about what you mean by automated processes.
If you think about that you have thousands of projects, you cannot rely on yourself to import all the projects one by one or doing every single activity in this amount of projects. So you will need to have some automated process that can make sure that you can make sure that they are happening regardless of someone clicking the buttons for all the projects. So I would say that some of the processes that are quite important is, as I said, import of all the projects. So you want to make sure that the projects are in sync. So if you are deleting projects in your repository, you need to make sure that you're deleting in sync as well. You don't want to trust anyone. You want to automatically create Jira tickets for your issues according to your business rules. So you have to build such a integration. You will have the same vulnerability in different projects. So you have to have an ability to ignore the issues, the same vulnerability in different projects. So for that, you need to create a mass activities that will be able to perform this.
Yeah, well, I mean, that sounds like a lot of work. So how does Snyk help customers build these automations?
Yeah, we have a lot of tools that were built in order to help our customers. We have, for example, PI Snyk. That's a code written to leverage our APIs. So, on this code, we have a lot of examples of business use that can be used, and you can just change some of the logic and adapt it to what it's needed. So customers do not have to write everything from scratch. Our technical services, they are also doing a lot of tools based on actual customer needs, such as automatic synchronization of repositories. So another nice tool that they did is the ability to check if a package and version is not allowed in all your projects. So you can just scan all of them, and it'll give you the list. Okay, this not allowed, the packages coming from this, that, and that project, so you can take actions. We have another tool that is failing builds according to custom business rules. So all of these tools that we created already help customers on saving a huge effort that can be saved just by reusing those tools.
That's great. So who typically builds the scripts? Is it the customer DevOps team?
Yes, definitely DevOps, but on big customers, we see that they have a centralized DevOps team. So you usually start working with this centralized DevOps. So they build all the needed tools according to the definition and understanding of development and security teams. And for smaller customers, we see that usually they do not have a centralized DevOps team. So we usually start working with the DevOps of the first team that is deploying Snyk, and then we make sure that those tools that are being built, they are generic and can be used for all the other teams as well. And I think that the use of those tools are critical for the success of Snyk implementation.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So where can customers find a list of these types of automations, or is it something they should be speaking to their CSM about?
Yes, definitely they need to speak with their CSM, because unfortunately we have not been a good work on having all the documentation centralized. This is something that we are working on these days, but customers should talk to us, because we can guide them not on finding the tools, but also giving ideas and understanding of what was done before and how solutions can be found. So definitely the CSM is the focal point for finding those.
Excellent. Now, I want to jump back to something you talked about earlier, which is a growing trend amongst enterprise customers, especially those with more mature open source security practice. And that's gamification. Can you tell me a little bit more about those initiatives and how they can help drive developer engagement and adoption?
Yes, gamification is the new trend, and I think that is the trend that will help us on getting more developers on board. We have, for example, one customer that what they're doing is what they call a Friday fix. So every month, one Friday, all the development team is fixing vulnerabilities that was raised by Snyk, and after, of course, the triage and prioritization of the security team. So just think about the amount of effort that the company is putting on having the whole development team working a full day just on fixing those vulnerabilities. So the effort is big and the results are really great. We've seen customers also doing scoreboards. So all the teams, they start giving challenges to the teams. For example, the first team that will finish 30% of their high vulnerabilities will earn a certain amount of points. We can have challenges like the first team to have 0 denial of services vulnerabilities will get another extra point. Sometimes you can have a challenge in the middle of the day. Just say, okay, who will be the first one to fix 5 vulnerabilities until the end of the day will get extra points. And then, of course, they celebrate the points, and they make sure that everyone is having a good feeling on the progress of the game. Another example that we see is giving belts, security belts, like judo or karate. We start with a yellow belt, and then when you are progressing with the activities on the program of security, you are upgraded to blue belt, yellow belt, and then of course everyone wants to be the black belt master of security. So this also gives a lot of intention and a lot of drive to the developers to continue. Another activity that we see is giving badges to teams that have 0 vulnerabilities, so they can show on their GitHub, on their Git repository that with the badge they are vulnerability free. So everyone is proud to show it to them, to the other teams. And I think these are the most common. Tell me, Andrew, what are the gamification examples that you've seen?
Well, I want to pick up on the idea of belts. I love that idea of recognizing top performers and showing progression through belts. I often hear from my customers that they like the idea of gamification, but they don't necessarily have the time or resources or budget to implement a formalized gamification strategy or platform. Instead, they rely on simpler but still effective ways to drive remediation efforts. So, for example, the DevOps teams will make each development team's monthly remediation results public. And as if by magic, the teams who are at the bottom of the security fix leaderboard one month tend to perform really well the next. But I think what's really important here is making sure that as a security or development team, you need to be celebrating all security wins widely and publicly across your company. Doing this tends to have a really positive impact on how security is viewed at the company. So the more positive feedback you can deliver, the greater the value developers will put on security, which in turn improves your overall security culture at your organization.
Well, that's really great. I think we already covered a lot, and unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time. So I'll say thank you for your time.
Excellent. Thank you, Andre, and thank you, everyone, for tuning in.